Here we are in Genesis chapter 49. We see here that Jacob blesses his sons, and oh boy, what a difference that's going to make. The 12 brothers, plus Ephraim and Manasseh, receive quite different blessings from Jacob, as we will see. And Jacob doesn't exactly follow their birth order, but he's not doing it randomly. Verse 1, Then Jacob summoned his sons and said, Assemble yourselves, that I may tell you what will befall you in the days to come. Gather together and hear, O sons of Jacob, and listen to Israel, your father. The verses that follow here are prophecies of each son's descendants, although they do refer somewhat to the character of the son. Mostly, in fact, almost all of it really targets the descendants, not the particular man himself. The phrase, in the days to come, literally is in the end of the days. Now, this does not refer just to the time of Moses or Joshua, although it does to some extent. It includes the whole history of Israel right on through to the very end of days, when the Messiah set up his kingdom on earth. So Jacob has taken a very long view here in these blessings. And we'll see that both physical and spiritual blessings and prophecies are included here. The prophecies of the future of the 12 tribes are quite different, as we're going to see. Now we have first, Reuben, Simeon, and Levi receive serious judgments for actions that cost them any chance at receiving the blessings of the firstborn. Since they were numbers 1, 2, and 3, the firstborn blessing should have gone to first Reuben, but if not that, then either Simeon or Levi. But we don't see that. Now, they do get serious judgments, although Levi is also granted a blessing that this tribe would become the priests of the nation, the Levites. And the 4 sons of the concubines receive less recognition than the other 8. Treating sons of concubines as lesser was common, and it's very likely that the 12 brothers were very aware of the differences in who their moms were. Now, 2, Joseph and Judah, received by far the greatest blessings. Now, we have a map. It's an approximate, because in the boundaries we see set out for the tribes that mark this city and that city in certain places. Archaeologists have not found all these places because many of them no longer exist as viable entities, as acting cities, although some do, like Jericho and so forth. They're still around. But it shows you the approximate locations here. We'll see that green is Judah, and we'll see Simeon, that tribe, is inside the tribal area of Judah. Also, we see Dan over to the left on the seacoast. It shows a modern city of Jaffa as belonging in there. And then we have Benjamin sandwiched between Judah and Ephraim, and that's going to make a big difference. Benjamin is between a rock and a hard place in a way. We see the biggest one is Manasseh, because half the tribe decided to stay on the east side and the other half went over Jordan. And so you see they have a double section there, which matches with what we'll see later on in the verses here. Dan, by the way, is right down next to the Philistines. And it seems that constant interaction with these warlike Philistines finally drove them to move up to the north side of Naphtali, which you see in a green at the top of where it says Hittites. Now, the Hittites later on weren't there anymore. So Dan was able to move in there above Naphtali and Asher because they wanted to get away from the constant harassment of the Philistines. Verse 3, Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might and the beginning of my strength, preeminent in dignity and preeminent in power. uncontrolled as water. You shall not have preeminence, because you went up to your father's bed. Then you defiled it. He went up to my couch. Now, I visualize this as that last phrase there, as Jacob was speaking to Reuben. He then looks across to the other 11 brothers and makes that statement. Then you defiled it. That little last phrase, he went up to my couch. Wow. Okay, as we see, Reuben was the oldest. He should have got it, but he blew it because of this very, very sinful act he did. He was trying to take over leadership of the tribe. Now, in 1 Chronicles 5, 1 and 2, we see further description of this. Now the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, for he was the firstborn, but because he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given to the sons of Joseph, the sons of Israel, so that he is not enrolled in the genealogy according to the birthright. Though Judah prevailed over his brothers, and from him came the leader, yet the birthright belonged to Joseph. So First Chronicles gives us a different picture of what happened here, and it started back in chapter 47, 48, and 49 here. Okay, Reuben is described as unstable like water. Okay, he doesn't have the qualifications needed to lead Israel. And we also find that none of his descendants ever accomplished anything. You don't see much mention. It mentions that, yes, they participated in some of the battles and this and so forth, but as any individual, we don't find any. And another thing, this tribe, his descendants, were one of the three that decided not to cross over Jordan. They stayed on the east side. Verse 5, Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are implements of violence. Let my soul not enter into their council. Let not my glory be united with their assembly. Because in their anger they slew men, and in their self-will they lamed oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it's fierce, and their wrath, for it's cruel. I will disperse them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Now, where it says lamed oxen, they hamstrung the oxen, so they were useless, which was not necessary. The oxen hadn't done anything. These were very wicked and violent men. Okay, these two he rejects because of they were proud, they were unrepentant about what they had done. They murdered not just Shechem, the son of the king, or the leader there, but they killed the whole city, the men, and then took the children and the women as slaves. Wow. Jacob prophesies that they're going to be dispersed among the tribes of Israel. They will not continue to have a separate place for themselves. And so we see over time, Simeon got absorbed into the tribe of Judah. They were already inside it, and after a while, it basically lost its identity. However, as we know from future prophecy, the members of this tribe of Simeon still exist, and they will come back someday, and we'll see them. Levi is not going to get granted land like the other tribes, and that sounds, oh, bad, you don't get a place. But instead, it's really a blessing that comes about. They would be appointed as the priests for the nation, and they would be granted 48 cities within each of the other tribes, along with some land surrounding these towns for their crops and livestock. And it's interesting, even today, the Jews in Israel do not count the Levites as Jews in consideration of their duty as the priestly tribe. Now, they're not saying they don't belong. They're saying they are separate because they are the priests. Verse 8, Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's son shall bow down to you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From his prey, my son, you have gone up. He couches, word is crouches. He lies down as a lion, and as a lion who dares rouse him up. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet till Shiloh comes. And to him shall be the obedience of all the peoples. He ties his foal to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He washes his garments in wine and his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes are dull from wine and his teeth white from milk. My. Judah, we see here, receives a major blessing, actually multiple components of it, and some of it reaches very far down into the future. However, we see him getting the spiritual blessing because through him will be Christ who will come, while Joseph, as we'll see in a few verses, receives the physical blessing, which he had already is recounted to us back in chapter 48, and this would be done through his sons Ephraim and Manasseh. Judah is described as a lion, and he became the new leader of Israel after Jacob passed away. His name means praise. It's interesting. And his tribe received praise from the other tribes. And eventually, everybody is going to give him praise, even those that don't want to do it. Everybody will bend the knee to the coming Son, who is the Lion of the tribe of Judah. This is Christ Jesus, our Messiah and King. He's the King of kings and Lord of lords. Let's take a moment to look at verse 10, Shiloh. All kinds of things have been said about that word. Now, let's point out some basics. It's a proper noun, and it named a place that existed, a small village or city in the time of the judges. It's also another name for Jesus when he comes to rule forever. So this verse 10 is a messianic promise or prophecy. Now, the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70 brought about the loss of the scrolls containing the genealogies of the Jews. They now have no way to even prove that they're Jews, at least going back before the first century AD. After that, various efforts have been made to try to keep a genealogy going, but they cannot connect it back. However, one genealogy from Judah still remains, and that is of Christ Jesus, which we find in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke. Even more, his genealogy has never been disputed by the Jews. They have looked at it, they agree, it fits, they don't argue with it. And even though, even with all of that going on and their recognition of that, they will not acknowledge him as their Messiah, at least a greater number of them today. Of course, there are Jews who have accepted Christ, and they're oftentimes referred to as Messianic Jews. Verse 13, Zebulun will dwell at the seashore, and he shall be a haven for ships, and his flank shall be towards Sidon. So this tribe will become known for its success in commercial ventures. Their land reached from the Lake of Galilee to the Mediterranean Sea, and so they became involved in shipping and other maritime activities. The Via Maris, meaning the way of the sea, was one of the most prominent and largest trading routes in Israel, and it ran right through their land. Now, we have no person of significance mentioned in the Bible as coming from this tribe, but they are mentioned as assisting in the battle with the king of Hazor that you read about in the Song of Deborah and Barak in Judges 5. Verse 14, Issachar is a strong donkey lying down between the sheepfolds. When he saw that a resting place was good and that the land was pleasant, he bowed his shoulder to bear burdens and became a slave at forced labor. Very little is known about this tribe. Now, a strong donkey, that doesn't sound very much of a compliment, does it? Because donkeys or asses were a major means of transport in old times, and people actually thought of them in pretty high terms. And so I liken this to sort of like we have pickup trucks today as a utilitarian type of vehicle. So it actually, to be compared to an ass or a donkey, which sounds terrible in our language, is actually a compliment. Now, they seem to be content with agriculture and not interested in political power. They did earn renown for heroic bravery, again in that Song of Deborah and Barak, and they were connected with Reuben in that. Verse 16, Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a horned snake in the path, that bites the horse's heels so that his rider falls backward. For your salvation I await, O Lord. Now, Dan's name actually means judged. And so it's thought by many commentators that Jacob said that he shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Of course, they all were tribes of Israel, in order to show that this tribe, along with the other 3 sons born to the concubine wives, was equal to those of the sons who came from the true wives, Rachel and Leah. Now, serpent and horned snake. This refers to the sand viper of the Middle East, which is one of the most venomous snakes in the world. I'm not sure that was quite an honor to be referred to as a sand viper. So let's move on from this lovely picture. This tribe is going to become what I call problem child of Israel. There was a bunch of things going on here as we read through the Old Testament. They received a bad territory, one which bordered the warlike Philistines. This was such a problem, of course, they finally had to move up to the northernmost part of Israel near Mount Hermon. That would be north of Naphtali and Asher. They were left out of the tribal genealogies in 1 Chronicles 2. That's not good. And they're not listed among the tribes who will make up the 144,000 sealed witnesses in Revelation 7. However, they are mentioned in Ezekiel 48 in the description of the millennial kingdom as receiving a portion of land during the millennium, which means that they were around during the Great Tribulation. This also, along with other things we'll see here, indicates the 10 tribes are not gone. They're lost. We're not sure where they are, although we know from study of the last chapter, 48, it's thought that some may have been identified now. And it's interesting that it's happening at this time in our history. Now, most famous member of the tribe is probably Samson, who was one of the judges. Now, verse 18, Jacob cries out in anticipation that he'll soon meet his Lord very soon. Now, that's the common assumption, but others believe perhaps that Jacob is referring back to Genesis 3:17 about the Redeemer having his heel bitten by the serpent, Satan, and yet his heel crushing the serpent's head. The way this is described here, I just don't see that. I don't see Jacob thinking about that. Another thing is, we'll find out, he's close to dying. He wants to go see his Lord. His life is over and he's ready to go. So he says, for your salvation, I wait, O Lord, just a little bit longer. He'll be with him. Verse 19, as for Gad, raiders shall raid him, but he will raid at their heels. See, there we have another very short sentence here, one sentence blessing here, and it's kind of ambiguous. Now, it does seem to say that the tribe will be oppressed, when we know from history they were, but they would have success at last. We can see that members of this tribe sided with David, which was a smart idea, in 1 Chronicles 12, and they showed bravery in battle. This was another tribe that didn't cross over Jordan. They decided to stay on the east side. They did something a little bit like Lot with Abraham. They came across, they were getting ready as a group to cross over to the west, and they looked at the land in front of them and said, wow, this is really neat. This is really good. We'll take this if you'll let us. They're actually instructed to go over Jordan, but they chose not to. Just like Lot, when Abraham said, take what you want, I'll have the rest. And he chose that which looked the best, which was kind of greedy. But Abraham let him do it. And so we see Gad here is one of those tribes that behaved a little bit like Lot. Excuse me. The only member of this tribe of note and is mentioned in Judges, and his name was Jair, who led the tribe for a while. Otherwise, you don't see really much anyone singled out by name. We also have to remember that Gad is also known in Scripture as Gilead, which was the name of the region. And so they were kind of, the name Gad and Gilead are sometimes used interchangeably. Verse 20, as for Asher, his food shall be rich, and he will yield royal dainties. Now the term Asher means happy. This tribe's allotment was one of the most fertile in all of Israel. I chose a modern picture of this general region to show just a lush area of crops. When we were there on our trip to Israel in 2018, we drove up through this area, and it was one of the most amazing areas I've ever seen anywhere. Wheat fields next to banana groves, next to olive orchards, next to apple orchards, and back to wheat fields or maybe barley fields. It was just a mixed up grouping of plants that, as a little backyard gardener, I have never seen so many different kinds of plants from so many different areas of the world all put together in one area. It is today getting closer and closer to being some kind of a Garden of Eden. So we see here Asher is blessed with good fortune, and together with Naphtali, it still has some of the most fertile land in all of Israel, which is up toward the northern end, below Mount Hermon. This is higher elevation, more rainfall, and so they are blessed with an abundance of riches. Now, we do have a well-known descendant of Asher, which was the prophetess Anna, which we can read about in Luke 2, verse 36. Verse 21, Naphtali is a doe let loose. He gives beautiful words. Kind of an odd blessing. The members of this tribe would be graceful, swift, and quick to react. That's the analogy to a doe, a female deer of that region. Very quick, very sure-footed, very graceful. The tribe of Naphtali was under the leadership of Barak, and they became famous for their bravery, which is in Judges 5. And its territory was later part of Galilee. And it's interesting that Naphtali's area was honored by being the area where Jesus recruited most of his disciples and began his ministry. We also see Naphtali referred to in Isaiah 9:1, in which it was predicted that this territory would see a great light. Verse 2 also of Isaiah, where it's referring to the coming of Christ. So Naphtali gets a blessing, but it's a short one. Verse 22, Joseph is a fruitful bough by a spring. Its branches run over a wall. The archers bitterly attacked him and shot at him and harassed him. But his bow remained firm and his arms were agile. From the hands of the mighty one of Jacob, from there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel. From the God of your father who helps you, and by the Almighty who blesses you with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lies beneath, blessing of the breasts and of the womb. The blessings of your father have surpassed the blessings of my ancestors up to the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. May they be on the head of Joseph and on the crown of the head of the one distinguished among his brothers. His tribe, which means Ephraim and Manasseh, settled in what was later known as Samaria. This blessing is overall one of fruitfulness, but it'll come at a high cost. We see that Judah and Joseph received the greatest blessings, which we see reflected in the number of verses allocated to them in this chapter. And compare that with some of the others that only had a single sentence given to them. Manasseh received the largest territorial allotment, which covered both the east and west banks of the Jordan. It showed up obviously on the map. And these two tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh, also had the largest populations during the time of Moses and Joshua. Verse 27, Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he devours the prey, and in the evening he divides the spoil. Wow, another rather enigmatic blessing. Okay, we see that the tribe of Benjamin is going to turn out to be warlike and predatory. We also know that they would eventually be allied with Judah as making up the two tribes of the southern kingdom after Solomon. Their land allotment was right between Judah and Ephraim, two big tribes, and that gave them a not very enviable role as being a buffer state between these two tribes. And that meant they were oftentimes encroached upon by one or the other, or both, of those tribes. And then later, if Ephraim decided to get mad, or Judah decided to get mad at Ephraim, and they were to go to battle over it, well, guess who's in the middle? And not a very enviable position. Both the north-south and east-west trade routes ran right through this area of the tribe of Benjamin, and that provided them with a means of income as traders. These lines of commerce just beckoned to be where they could set up their shopping malls and all that sort of thing. Yeah, well, not really. However, they also gained a reputation as raiders of caravans. That meant they were bandits as well. That was not a good reputation. Jerusalem was at first located in Benjamin, as well as the towns of Jericho, Gibeon, and Bethel. Later, Jerusalem was captured and made part of Judah by King David. Benjamin was also, as a tribe, involved in a really ugly event that mirrors Sodom and Gomorrah to some extent. And you'll see that in the last two chapters of Judges. As a result of that, a civil war broke out and ended in the tribe of Benjamin almost being wiped out by the other tribes. And the last verse of Judges 21 gives us the moral picture of that time, which is a well-known quote. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. In the Old Testament, one of the most famous of the Benjamites was Saul, the first king of Israel. And then two other famous members were Esther and Mordecai. And as I mentioned earlier, the Apostle Paul claimed to have be a member of the tribe of Benjamin. Verse 28. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said to them when he blessed them. He blessed them, every one, with a blessing appropriate to him. Then he charged them and said to them, I am about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought along with the field from Ephron the Hittite for a burial site. There they buried Abraham and his wife Sarah. There they buried Isaac and his wife Rebekah. There I buried Leah. The field and the cave that is in it purchased from the sons of Heth. When Jacob finished charging his sons, he drew his feet into the bed and breathed his last and was gathered to his people. Jacob's final request of his sons was that they would bury him at Mamre in the cave of Machpelah, where his grandfather and grandmother, his mother and father, and one of his wives, Leah, were buried. He wants to go back home there. He wants to be buried there. And the middle part of these verses here points out, as a reminder to us, that this burial place was legally purchased and belonged to the Israelites. They didn't steal it. They didn't take it by war. They bought it. Jacob now has enough strength to lie back down on his bed, where he then passed away peacefully. He has gone from being self-reliant to being completely reliant upon God, his protector and redeemer. And we have in Hebrews 11:21 a testimonial to him. By faith, Jacob, as he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph and worshiped, leaning on the top of his staff. We also could look at this in modern terms, that the blessings of his sons was basically the last item to be checked off on his bucket list. That's a modern saying. This was the last thing he felt he needed to do before he would release himself. He probably was very sick, very old, very tired, and he knew he had not much longer and he needed to get through it. We also see here in Jacob's life the long suffering and patience of God's dealing with him. And that is encouraging to us. We can go astray, we can backslide, we can drift away, not pay attention, stop reading the Bible, do all these things, trust unto ourselves, try to figure out all our problems by ourselves. But God is patient with us also. He's always there, and he's always ready if we'll simply ask him. We should be thankful that God is also patient with us. Now, next week, we'll move on to the last chapter of the book of Genesis, and we'll bid goodbye to Joseph.